Wait. Before we start, just want to make sure we're clear here. While this podcast talks about sobriety, mental health, and addiction, it is not meant to replace professional medical advice. Welcome to Sisters in Sobriety.
I'm Kathleen.
And I'm Sonia.
And we're ex-sisters-in-law, brought together in marriage and bonded through our sobriety journey.
Join us as we talk sobriety, addiction, and everything in between. You're in for quite a ride. And our Substack is buzzing with amazing content, from creative mocktail recipes to insightful courses and reflective exercises. There is something for everyone. Don't miss out. It's a great way to add some extra joy and depth to your journey. Check it out. Welcome to Sisters in Sobriety. Today, we are joined by Jeremy Lipkowitz, an executive coach, meditation teacher, and founder of Unhooked Academy, whose work focuses on helping high achievers break free from compulsive digital and sexual behaviors, including porn addiction. And after struggling with addiction and depression in his 20s, meditation became the turning point that changed his life trajectory, ultimately leading him to spend some time as a Buddhist monk in Asia and devote his career to helping others reclaim agency over their habits and inner world. Welcome, Jeremy.
Happy to be here.
Thanks so much. So you've shared that addiction and depression were part of your early adult experience before. So what did that period look like for you personally?
Yeah, it was a long period of my life, but it was the kind of thing that it wasn't an acute moment. It wasn't this catastrophic thing or capital T trauma. It was just the ways that I, wasn't really satisfied. I wasn't secure in myself. I didn't have confidence. I was always looking at what I didn't have rather than what I did have. So just the slow ways that kind of mindset built up in my life of not feeling good enough, not feeling worthy, of being insecure, being teased as a kid, all the little things that can happen to a kid that make them feel insecure. And addiction was a big part of it. I started to learn at an early age that I could do things that made me feel pleasant, that made me feel a buzz, whether it was alcohol or weed or porn or video games. And those slowly crept into my life more and more, to the point where when I did get to college, some of those had grown substantially. Porn was the biggest one. Porn, drinking, some video games. But porn really crept into my life and started to cause a lot of problems in my mental well-being, my relationships, a lot of different aspects.
And so you talk about meditation being a turning point. What drew you to meditation and what kept you kind of committed to it?
Yeah, to understand what drew me to meditation, I first have to talk about the turning point where I realized I had a problem with porn, because it wasn't until I discovered I had an addiction to porn and some bad habits there that I then found meditation as a way to deal with that. But what happened was, when I was in college, I was in my early 20s. I was at UC Davis at the time studying genetics and genomics. And on the outside, my life looked really wonderful. I had a really good life. I had a lot of friends. I had lovers and romances, and I was a stellar student. So from the outside, things looked really wonderful. But on the inside, I was really miserable, because I never felt like I was good enough. No matter how well I did in my exams or how many people liked me, I always felt like I needed more, like I needed better grades or more friends, or I just needed more. Nothing ever felt good enough. And in particular, one of the manifestations of that was feeling like I needed more romance, more sex, more pleasure. And I remember this turning point in my life where I was in my, again, kind of early 20s, maybe 23, 24, and I was walking down the street in Davis, California. And I just remember this incident where these college girls were walking in front of me. They were probably freshmen or sophomore. And when I saw them walking in front of me, I was just so consumed by this feeling of lust, of wanting to objectify them and stare at them and ogle at their bodies and think, oh, okay, I need to look. And in that moment, it really felt like this deep emptiness inside of me, like this feeling of of lack, of a void, of not being happy. And I remember that feeling of lust was a real state of suffering. It wasn't a state where I was content with what I had. I wasn't appreciative of all the good things that were going on in my life. I was so focused on what I didn't have. And that was a turning point for me, because I realized how much of my life was consumed by this feeling of lust, of staring at people, of objectifying women, of wanting what I didn't have. And I realized that if I continued to live my life that way, first of all, it would just be a miserable way to live your life, always looking at what you don't have. You never appreciate what you do have. But the other thing I saw is that it would grow, it would escalate, and I saw my future. And I realized that if I kept going down that path, I would be some creepy 70-year-old dude who was hitting on girls at college bars, because there were people like that in my college town. And I saw my future, and I realized that's the future that's ahead of me if I keep acting this way. And so it was a bit of a shock to my system. It was a bit of an existential crisis, because I realized that I was going down a dark path. I hadn't gotten to a very dark place yet. I wasn't at some crazy rock bottom, but I saw that the path that I was on wasn't leading me to the happiness that I wanted. And, part of that realization was also realizing that, again, I had all these other successes externally, stellar student, setting the curve in all my classes, a lot of academic success, but it wasn't actually making me any happier. And so that day gave me this question of, what is happiness? Like, is it even possible to ever be happy? Because I have all these things that I thought I wanted, but it didn't make me happy. So that then sent me on a quest to look at this question of what is real happiness? What is real inner fulfillment? And that's when I started finding some books on positive psychology, ended up finding some books on Buddhist philosophy, and found one book in particular that really opened up my eyes to what real inner fulfillment and inner peace were.
And so where did that lead you? Like, when you first started, did it spark something where you thought, I need to go deeper into this?
Yeah. One of the key things that it highlighted for me was how important it was to understand what was going on in my mind. Not just understand what was going on in my life outside of my mind, not just focus on, okay, do I have this type of girlfriend? Do I have these type of grades? Do I have this money or these watches, whatever? But to understand the quality of my mind and the quality of my attention, and how important that was for determining my sense of fulfillment, integrity, inner peace. There was a quote from this book that really impacted me. It was this quote from neuroscience that said, "Neurons that fire together wire together." And it just made me realize, the understanding, what that is basically saying that the more you use certain neural pathways, the more you think certain types of thoughts, the stronger those types of thoughts become, the more likely you are to think those thoughts. So if you are constantly thinking judgmental thoughts, judging this person, judging that person, judging yourself, you're literally strengthening the neural pathways associated with judgment so that they're more likely to fire in the future. And so what I realized is that every time I logged onto a porn website, I was strengthening these neural pathways of lusting after women, objectifying women, scanning my environment to look at, what I didn't have and what I wanted, and who was the hottest person in the room. Like, those were the super highways in my brain. And I felt that because part of the issue that I was struggling with is, in college, I would go to a cafe because I wanted to study my textbook. And I would sit down at the cafe, and if an attractive person walked by, my mind felt like it was out of my control. Like, it would just want to look and objectify. And even though I wanted to just study, my mind kind of took me for a ride somewhere else. And it felt like I was a slave to this power of lust. Like, I was enslaved by that mental state. And so this book on Buddhist philosophy really taught me that happiness is learning how to train and discipline the mind, how to cultivate mental qualities that lead to happiness. Like, if you want real happiness, you can cultivate the qualities that directly lead to it. like gratitude or
Yeah.
compassion or contentment, all these things. So that was a huge turning point, was just realizing how important it was to take care of my mind.
Yeah. And so, since you brought up the neuroscience, neurologically, when someone is consuming porn, what is happening? Aside from, I know, I heard when you said like strengthening the neural pathways, but what is happening and what, yeah.
Yeah, well, dopamine plays an important role in this story. I mean, many people have heard the word dopamine and, okay, it's everywhere in Dopamine Nation. And, dopamine is involved in a lot of things. It's involved in movement and all kinds of things. But one of the main functions that it plays is for, kind of things that we want, things that we want to move towards, things that we crave or that we desire. A lot of people think that it's the molecule of pleasure, that it's all about, dopamine is pleasure, but it's actually less about the experience of liking something, and it's more about the experience of wanting something. So it's released when we want something. It's there to make us want to do things and feel a motivation to go get something. And
Like
so
that
this is one of the
lust
things exactly
that you were
like that
talking
lust.
about. Okay.
Yeah. And it's actually not as much involved in the experience of joy or appreciation or pleasure. It is a little bit, when something is pleasurable, that dopamine gets released because it's our body's way of saying, hey, that felt good. I'm going to make you want more of it so we can get more of it. Because it's an evolutionary system. Evolutionarily, if we found something that made us feel good, some food, a mate, and it was pleasurable, our body said, okay, I'm going to train you to want more of that so that you go get it. And so, what's going on when we're engaged in any kind of dopaminergic experience, porn being, a very highly dopaminergic experience, it releases a lot of dopamine, is that we're training our brain more and more to feel this sense of, I need this in order to be okay. And that's true for social media. It's true for junk food. It's like when we get these large dopamine hits from these things, it's our body training us to think, you need this in order to be okay. And over time, we become accustomed to a certain level where we end up needing more and more. So we need more porn. We need more extreme porn. We might need more social media or more engaging, entertaining, stimulating types of content in order to get the same feeling, that same rush. And so that's how it can escalate. It's one of the other issues with addiction is the escalation.
Would you say that you had early exposure, and how does early exposure to porn, for example, impact that like long-term neural wiring?
Yeah, I was exposed to not necessarily porn at a young age, but I remember the early things that I was exposed to that started to feel similar were things like the lingerie catalogs that used to come in the mailbox. I would remember like the Macy's catalog or the Victoria's Secret catalog that would come in the mail. And I remember just seeing that and thinking, wow, when I look at these pictures, something in my body feels good. It was a very natural, kind of innocent, beautiful, because the sexuality is beautiful. We don't want to cut that off. We don't want to suppress it. We want to understand it and cultivate a healthy relationship with sexuality. But it started as just that innocent curiosity around things that were sexual. Over time, I started to learn that, if I look at images of women, whether in lingerie or once we got dial-up, internet and high-speed internet, that I could control the influx of that pleasant stimulation. And I could use it as a tool to escape, to numb out, to, avoid difficult or painful emotions. Because that's what a lot of addiction is. It's a way to cope with emotions that you don't know how to process, whether it's boredom or loneliness or fear, all the different things that people don't want to be with. We use whatever our drug of choice is. Some people use alcohol, some people use, other kinds of drugs. Many people use porn as a way to numb out and escape unpleasant emotions.
And when we're using that, is there a correlation between kind of a rebound anxiety and depression almost? So if we're numbing those feelings or we're controlling our dopamine release, how does that affect our overall anxiety and depression?
Yeah, great question. Because, what happens when that's the primary tool we use to deal with some unpleasant emotion, we're not actually addressing the unpleasant emotion. We're just suppressing it, shoving it down, sweeping it under the rug. And, what we know is that whatever you resist persists. And the more you try to push something down, the stronger it grows. The more sensitive you become to any experience of unpleasant emotions, the more it impacts you when just the slightest bit of it comes up. And so what we see is that, people, become more and more sensitive to just the tiniest bit of boredom. Like most of us know this, right? It's like you're standing in line at the grocery store and you have to wait there for 20 seconds. And even 20 seconds is unbearable. So what do? We reach for our phone because we become so sensitive to the smallest bits of unpleasant experience. We don't want even just the slightest bit of unpleasantness. A little bit of boredom, I can't handle it. Let me stimulate myself. Let me find something to distract myself and push away this feeling of boredom. And that's true for many of these unpleasant emotions. People, don't want to have even the tiniest bit of sadness. Some memory comes up that makes you feel sad. I don't want to feel this. Let me go check on, my notifications on LinkedIn or Instagram, or let me go get some food. Let me go have a drink. And so we run away from our unpleasant emotions and they end up ruling our life because we become more and more sensitive to the smallest bits of them.
And so how does compulsive behavior then start to impact your identity or your self-esteem? I know for me, drinking or being a drinker became a really big part of my personality. And so how do you explain that sort of identity shift? And then what happens when people start recovery?
Yeah, with porn and sex, it's a really fascinating topic because it becomes a huge part of people's identity, but it becomes a very shameful part of people's identity where they feel that they have to live a double life because it's a hidden part. And for many people who struggle with porn or sex addiction, it's this skeleton in their closet. It's this part of themselves that they feel if people knew what I was doing, they would kick me out of the tribe. They would call the police. They would run away. They would call me a monster. Because there's so much shame associated with sexual compulsive behaviors. I mean, even talking about sex or talking about porn, talking about masturbation is really sensitive. Even if you have a healthy relationship with it, it's quite a sensitive thing to talk about. And so for a lot of people who end up becoming addicted to these things or having compulsive, unhealthy habits around porn or sex or masturbation, it becomes a strong identity of I'm broken, I'm messed up in some way, I'm a pervert, other people have a healthy relationship with sexuality, but for me, I'm broken. And if people knew this about me, they wouldn't love me. So it's a huge identity issue as well.
So it's different in the sense where I felt like I could harness my drinking into I just like to party or I'm really fun, while knowing sort of in the back of my mind it was problematic or that I was doing it more than other people or that, for example, I would show up a few drinks in or a bottle of wine into dinner. But it was different than what you're describing, where it's almost like you're isolating it. You're isolating that addiction. I was trying to merge the personality. And so,
Well, people do both because in porn, people also, you find people, there's a lot of cognitive dissonance where people will say, there's nothing wrong with this. It's just porn. Everybody watches porn. There's nothing wrong with the type of porn I'm watching. When in the back of their mind, they might actually know, hey, maybe there's nothing wrong with porn per se, but the stuff I'm watching, I feel out of integrity when I watch it. If they really checked in with themselves, they would kind of know, I wouldn't want my kids knowing that I'm watching this. I don't feel comfortable with the type of material I'm watching or what it's playing into in terms of how I think women should be treated. So there can be a lot of kind of this merging but cognitive dissonance where it's like, oh, I just like to party, or oh, porn is normal. There's nothing wrong with this. And it's part of the way that the saboteur shows up and tries to make excuses for us and say, you're okay. There's nothing wrong with this, because it's that part of us that wants to have the drink or watch the porn and will kind of lie to us to get its way.
Is there a distinction between sex and love addiction and porn addiction? Or is this all kind of part of the same, or is there a Venn diagram? Like, how do you look at it?
The way I look at it, so again, what's interesting is my journey into recovery had nothing to do with recovery for the first 10 years. I didn't even know the concept of recovery. I didn't really understand recovery was a thing until kind of 10 years after I had actually recovered. My entryway into this whole world of addiction and recovery was through Buddhism. And so my language and kind of my perspective looks at it from much more of a secular Buddhist lens. And through that lens, the way that I see it, like, it's all a spectrum and it's all overlapping, and it's not about any particular substance or behavior. It's about the underlying root cause of addictive behavior and escapism. And so whether it's porn or love or sex or junk food or social media or workaholism, it's all the same. It's a dynamic of the mind. It's kind of a malfunctioning of the mind where the mind doesn't know how to process unpleasant emotions. And so it runs away from those into whatever. And it can, for phases of our life, it might be porn, and then we might kind of deal with that, but then it slowly pops up. If we don't deal with the root issue, then it can pop up somewhere else. And you see this a lot, particularly in porn addiction. You see guys gritting through it and say, I'm going to stop watching porn. I'm going to brute force my way through it and use willpower and stop watching porn for 60 days or 90 days. But they never actually address why they developed that addiction in the first place.
Like a dry drug.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so it just pops up somewhere else because they never actually address it at the root level. Like, what is that addiction? What is that part of your mind and part of your soul that is running away and trying to escape your life? So in my mind, there's one big Venn diagram, and it's all, everything's overlapping with everything.
Yes, I get that. Maybe even exercise, what I'm talking
totally.
about? Totally. We had to talk right before we started that you exercise a lot.
Yeah. And, I like to be honest, I still have many things that I'm addicted to. That, like, it's layers of the onion that you like. Ideally, you start with the most harmful and the ones that have the biggest consequences. And you slowly work your way into the more subtle ways that we, want to feel good all the time and don't want to feel bad. And so for me, like, addiction it's one of those ones where it brings a lot of benefit to my life. I would rather be addicted to exercise than addicted to porn. But it can cause negative consequences. Like we were talking before, it's hard for me to take a rest day because I just, part of it is like, I like the way exercise makes me feel, but part of it is this feeling of like, if I don't exercise, am I worthy? So there's still a lot of baggage that I'm working through. So, but I like to normalize that like,
I do too.
Peeling back the layers of the onion.
Like, some days it's better for me to stay sober and binge watch Bridgerton, and like that is healthier than having a drink. And so I may not be the most like emotionally sober that day if I'm having a hard day, for example, but I'm making better choices with, less consequences. But what is the consequence really of you working out that much? You don't look like you're in pain. Doesn't look like you've hurt yourself. So I look at it that way too, right? Like, if there's like different consequences, like the consequences of my drinking far outweigh the consequences of binge watching like 6 episodes of Bridgerton.
Yeah. totally. And it's all relative, and you have to have a healthy and a sense of humor about it. Exactly the same for me. The consequences of a daily porn habit were way more detrimental and harmful to my life than having a daily exercise habit. That being said, I do need to be honest with myself about the fact that there are consequences to my exercise addiction, and it's an opportunity for me to look at it honestly and candidly and say, oh, maybe I can have a healthier relationship with this and improve. It's not an all or nothing. I don't have to give up exercise. I just have to say, are there ways that I could be in a healthier relationship with this?
Yeah, I noticed too that I am always listening to podcasts or audiobooks. So I always have my headphones in. And so sometimes I will challenge myself to vacuum the house without having a podcast in, or make dinner without listening to an audiobook. And so these things seem really, I was doing drugs and drinking like a bottle of wine a night. Like, are we really messing around with like an audiobook? Like, who cares? But it is, you're challenging yourself, right? Like,
Yeah.
You think there is something still there. Like, I know it, right? Deep down, I feel it when I turn on the podcast. Like, oh, I know what I'm trying to do. I know I'm trying to whatever that discomfort is.
Yeah. Like, I don't want to be with my own mind and my own thoughts.
Yeah.
Like, I want to have something to distract me and give me a little hit of, dopamine and excitement. It's funny because podcast is one of the other things that I was addicted to. And just as of 45, maybe 60 days ago, I had to I had to go cold turkey. And so I deleted Spotify from my phone. And I told myself I did it as a 30-day experiment. I said, 30 days, I'm not going to listen to any podcasts on my phone. And it was a real challenge, but it was like, because I was the same way. I wouldn't go anywhere. I wouldn't take out the trash. I wouldn't take a shower.
Yes, I wouldn't take out the trash. Yeah, I even with the shower. Yeah.
Yeah. And so here's one of the interesting, this kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier. One of the really interesting things with addiction where you can start to tell, is this an addiction, is that the sense of needing it gets bigger, whereas the sense of enjoying it stays the same or goes down. And so I felt that for myself. It's like, I didn't even necessarily enjoy listening to podcasts. I just felt like I needed it. Like, I need to put something on. Like, I have to find another podcast now, but I couldn't stop. It was just like it wasn't like, oh, I'm so excited I get to. There was a little bit of that like excitement, like, oh, what am I going to get? But it wasn't like a deep, fulfilling exercise for me, And so that sense of enjoying the act kind of stayed the same or went down. It started to seem more like a chore. Whereas the sense of I need this was actually increasing more and more. So that's how you can tell if you have a kind of
I love
addiction
that.
with something. Yeah.
And so along that same line, I wish Kathleen, my sister-in-law, was here because she talks a lot about this. But how does that go along with the idea of urge surfing? Can you teach us how to urge surf? So when I have that urge to, I take out the trash, right? And I want to put my headphones in and look for a podcast. And then I have to with me, I know that's an addiction or it has addictive qualities when it's annoying and I still do it. So then I'm like, oh, I don't have a pocket. I have to find something with a pocket before I take the trash out to put my phone in so that I can still continue to listen to my podcast. Or I'll be sitting there with one headphone, hanging off. And then I'm like, oh, have the trash in one hand. Yes. So can you teach me how to urge surf?
Yeah. Well, let's kind of set the stage, for anyone listening to this. For anyone listening, pick whatever habit it is that you want to explore your relationship with, where you feel like you have this compulsive, I need to do this, but I don't enjoy it. It feels like an addiction. Again, it might be porn, it might be alcohol, might be listening to podcasts. Part of, learning how to step away from those habits is one technique is urge surfing. In order to deal with that, an urge arises that says, you have to do this thing. And normally when we're not aware, we just follow through with it on autopilot. We think, yes, but we believe it completely because we're not even seeing the story that it's telling us. We just think, yeah, I need that podcast. If I don't have it, I won't be okay. Like, we're not actually thinking those words, but that's what our body is screaming at us. If you don't do this, it's not going to be okay. You need to listen to that podcast. You need that drink, right? So in order to surf the urge, first of all, you have to notice the urge before it happens or as it's happening. Because if you don't notice it, you can't actually work with it. And this is what happens for a lot of people is they're just on autopilot and they find themselves doing their bad habit, whatever it is, without even realizing how they got there. You know, they might say, okay, I want to do 30 days without porn. And then all of a sudden, one night, they like look up and, oh, I thought I was going to stop doing this, but here I am, an hour into a porn session. And so awareness is a critical part, like building the mental muscle of self-awareness is a critical part of urge surfing. So that's the first step, is just having the awareness of those things as they're arising so you can catch it before it gets too big. Because once you're caught, once your amygdala is hijacked and it's saying you need this thing, it's very hard to get off the bus at that point. It's not impossible. And there are techniques for, you know, unhijacking your amygdala that we can talk about. If you are already hooked and hijacked, like, how do you step off the bus? But before that, if you can catch it before you get fully hooked, that's the best time to work with it. Like, oh, I'm noticing this strong craving, this strong urge to put on a podcast. Is this actually going to serve me? So that's part of, you know, surfing the urge, is having that sacred pause, that space before you act out. There's this fantastic quote, you've probably heard of it. It's a paraphrase or a summary of Viktor Frankl's work by Stephen Covey. A lot of people just quote it to Viktor Frankl, but it's actually Stephen Covey. But it's this quote that goes, between stimulus and response, there's a space. And in that space is your power to choose your response. And in your response lies your growth and your freedom. So between stimulus, something happening, and your response, there's a space there. But if you don't have any access to that space, you just have stimulus and reaction. You know, like unpleasant emotion, I need a drink. Boredom, I need to pick up my phone, right? It's an automatic thing. But if you can gain access to that space between stimulus and your response, you can actually choose how to respond. You can say, how do I want to act in this moment? And, you know, that second half of that quote is, in your response lies your growth and your freedom. All of your growth and all of your freedom as a human is in that space. Because otherwise you're just a machine on autopilot, running out your preconditioned habits and behaviors.
Yeah.
All of your freedom is in that space, you know?
What would you say to people that are having trouble accessing that space? I know what I do is, even if I see like a crack of light, I'll like remind myself to like journal about it later. And that's where I will sometimes find that space. And then the next time it happens, I become like more aware. Are there other techniques you have for people to access that space?
Yeah. So one of the best, most powerful techniques for accessing that space is cultivating a mindfulness habit, cultivating that muscle of mindful awareness, because that's what mindfulness is. Mindfulness is awareness of what's happening in the moment as it's happening, with a clarity of mind where you can see clearly. And that awareness is a muscle that you can strengthen. This goes back to neuroplasticity. So the downside of neuroplasticity is that the more frequently you do unwholesome or unskillful mental qualities, they become stronger. Judgment, anger, greed, lust, hatred. If you cultivate those go stronger. The benefit of neuroplasticity is that the wholesome mind states, the mental qualities that lead to your freedom and to your happiness, also grow stronger the more you use them. So mindful self-awareness of what's occurring in the present moment is simply a neural pathway that you can strengthen. And you can build up that that muscle so that over time your autopilot response becomes one of awareness, thoughtfulness, patience, asking the question, is this thing I'm about to do, is that going to serve me? How do I want to act in this moment? Do I want to live with integrity, or do I want to follow greed, hatred, delusion? So having a daily meditation practice is one of the best things you can do. Even if it's, 5 minutes a day, just cultivating that muscle of what am I feeling right now in this moment? And can I actually observe it and cultivate that space?
How does one start a meditation practice? And what about people who say, like, no, I just can't do it. My mind won't stop racing.
Yeah. These days, there's a plethora of online resources for learning how to meditate. There is literally no excuse to not have some guidance. You could download an app. I have an online course. There's a gazillion online courses, free resources. Just finding an app, finding an online course, going to a meditation center if there's one in your area. There's so many ways to do it. The hard part is having a growth mindset around it. A lot of people think they need to be perfect at it from the start. And so, first of all, just understanding it's a practice that takes time. The first time you get on a sports field for whatever sport, the very first time you play some sport, you're going to be bad at it. You're not going to be LeBron James the moment you step on a basketball court. It takes practice, takes hard work. And it's the same with mindfulness. The very first time you try to practice, it's going to be bumpy, right? But over time, you can get better. You can improve your skill at it. That's the first part. The second part is actually learning, I hate to say it this way, but the correct way to meditate. A lot of people are just so bogged down with misconceptions around meditation. For example, thinking that a good meditation is when you sit down and your mind is totally blank and your mind is empty, right? And so a lot of people think that. They think, oh, I'm going to meditate, so let me sit down and clear my thoughts and just have an empty mind. And that's just not what meditation is. It's not how meditation works. You don't have to clear your mind. You don't have to stop yourself from thinking. That's actually, in many ways, impossible. You don't get to decide. Thoughts just come and go naturally. So your job is not to stop your thoughts. Your job is to learn how to observe your thoughts, how to be aware of them and have a better relationship with your thoughts. And when you start approaching your meditation like that, instead of thinking, I need to block out my thoughts, which is impossible, and then you get let down, you get frustrated and think you're no good at it. If instead you just say, oh, my job in this mindfulness is to sit down and simply observe what arises. I'll start with my breath, but if something distracts me, then I'll observe whatever it is that distracted me. If a thought distracts me, okay, let me observe the thought. Then thoughts are no longer the enemy. Thoughts are just another thing that's happening. So that's just one example of a misconception that people have in mindfulness or meditation that prevents them from making progress. But there's a gazillion other misconceptions in mindfulness and meditation. And so learning kind of what meditation really is and how to approach it and how to practice it is really helpful for this lifelong journey. It's not just about recovery. It's your mind we're talking about, which is for everyone.
That's interesting. I have had periods where I think, I don't know how to do this. I'm not good at it. I can't block out the thoughts. And so that is one of the bigger misconceptions. And things that I have tried are, for example, a mantra. And I think, well, if I just have this mantra, it'll block out everything else. How can I hold both the mantra and another thought at the same time? I figure out a way to do it somehow. I can do it. And so is that, where do mantras fit in for you, for example?
Great question. And it's an important topic because the word meditation is an umbrella term for many different kinds of practices. And they're very different. So there are many different kinds of meditation. In the same way that the word medicine is an umbrella term that can refer to all kinds of different things, and different medicines have different purposes. right? You might have a medicine for reducing a fever. You might have a medicine for increasing your body temperature. Who knows? And so the same is true for meditation. So understanding that there are different forms of meditation and they have different approaches and different outcomes as well. So mindfulness is a very particular type of meditation. And it's more around this present moment awareness, this acceptance of what is. It's a non-judgmental awareness of what's arising in your environment, in your body, in your mind. That's one type of meditation, mindfulness. Another type of meditation are what we call concentration-based meditations. So there are kinds of meditations that are explicitly focused on helping you concentrate the mind. And these kinds of meditations are things like mantra. So mantra meditations are meant to concentrate the mind, usually on a single point of focus. Sometimes it's a mantra, sometimes it's staring at a candle. There are many different ways to practice concentration meditation. But again, the point of it is to concentrate the mind, to unify the mind, and it can, at kind of its elevated states of concentration, it can feel like the mind has cleared out or the mind is empty. These are sometimes called like absorption states or the jhanas, and there's different names for these states where you just feel totally almost empty and there's just stillness, right? Now, those are powerful. It's an important tool to have. The problem is that people can become attached to those states of emptiness. And the moment they stop meditating, they haven't actually addressed the underlying relationship with reality. They've just found another way to kind of cultivate a sense of pleasure, of, things feel good right now. And so what happens is, this was like the key insight of the Buddha, the historical Buddha, is around when he was alive, like 2,500 years ago, there were all these different meditators and yogis who learned about these concentration techniques, and they were all very good at concentration. The problem was when they stopped meditating, they were still beset by anger and sorrow, and they didn't know how to deal with their emotions very well. They were like, okay, let me just go back to the meditation. What the Buddha realized is that this quality of mindfulness, which learns how to be with what is without running away from it, is a really important and integral part of inner peace. And that's what leads to freedom. When you can actually be with a busy mind and just say, my mind is busy. Okay, this is how it is. I don't need to fight against it. Or, sorrow or sadness is here. Okay, I don't need to push this away. I don't need to escape it. This is what it is. So that quality of mindfulness is kind of the balancing factor that leads to inner freedom. And that's what's really related to addiction recovery work, is that quality of equanimity. Equanimity is this quality of mind that's grounded in the present, knows how to be with what's unpleasant without pushing it away, knows how to be with what's pleasant without grasping after it or thinking, I need more of this, right? Because that happens too. We get some pleasant experience, a cookie, sex, something that feels good, and we think, I need more. I need to make this stay. How can I get two? And that is greed. That is lust. That's craving. We lose our center when we feel that also. So if you can just be with a pleasant experience and think, wow, this is pleasant, it's beautiful, but I don't need to grasp after it, because that's what causes suffering.
Are there physical practices that can help you with mindfulness? So like breath work. We've also had people that we've talked to that said, you can like mindfully brush your teeth. You can mindfully drive. You can mindfully. And so is that not a meditative state? Are there things that like physical things like, do I need to be sitting on a pillow? Do I need to be breathing a certain way? Do I need to be doing like in through the nose, out through the mouth? Are there physical aids to this like mindfulness state?
The answer to all of your questions is yes. Okay. So what I mean by that is the beautiful thing about mindfulness is that it's a quality of your mind It's not, it has nothing to do with what your body is doing or anything. So you don't need to be in full lotus posture or anything like that. You can do it while you're brushing your teeth. You can do it while you're driving. You can do it while you're having a conversation with someone. Because mindfulness is the quality of your attention to what's happening in the moment, which can be done in a single moment. So as you're brushing your teeth, if you're just feeling the bristles on your teeth, that, depending on the quality of your awareness, if you're really just present for the sensations that you're feeling, that's mindfulness. If in the next moment you have, a thought of some emotion comes up of fear, oh, I forgot to send this email, what's going to happen? If you can be aware of that fear, it's, oh, fear, that's also mindfulness. So mindfulness can be done in a single moment. So you can do it anywhere. You can do it while you're driving, So in that sense, it's great because you can do it anywhere. There are, physical things you can do to help you cultivate mindfulness. So for example, sitting still and breathing in and out and just feeling your in-breath and feeling your out-breath is mindful breathing. It's one way to practice a mindfulness meditation. Doing a mindful walking practice can also be powerful, where you're just walking and you're just feeling your feet, maybe feeling the breeze on your skin. That's also mindfulness. And you can do that as a very kind of more strict meditative practice where you're just walking 10 paces, turning around, walking back, and you just walk back and forth. Or you can go out for a walk and just be aware of what you're experiencing. So there's an infinite number of ways to practice mindfulness. So you can take it anywhere you go, which is wonderful. And so, pranayama or kind of yogic breathing or these like long inhales and exhales, that can be helpful to relax the body. And usually if I'm guiding a meditation, I'll usually start with like a few grounding deep breaths just to help you relax your body. The thing you want to be careful of is what mindfulness is really there for is to help you learn how to be with what is the way it is, not how you want it to be. So what we're really trying to cultivate with mindfulness is an acceptance of the way things are as they are, not how you want them to be or not how you don't want them to be. So with yogic breathing, for example, you're trying to breathe in a certain way. You want a deep inhale and a deep exhale, and there's an expectation and outcome that you're trying to cultivate with it. Whereas with mindfulness, you're more stepping back and looking at, oh, this is how my breath is in this moment. So you don't have to control your breathing. You let the body breathe itself, and then you just explore, what does my breath feel like in this moment if I'm not controlling it? And can I be at peace with the way it is?
And so this really kind of nags at one's perfectionist tendencies, right? Because that is sort of like, I want to be good at it. I want to do it right. Am I doing it right? Am I doing it right? And so, and judging yourself against other people. And so I feel like that about meditation. I feel insecure about mindfulness and meditation. And so that's really interesting.
Well, and this is we were talking about peeling back the layers of the onion. This is one of those really deep inner layers of the onion. Is perfectionism is a form of addiction. Perfectionism is this feeling, I want things to be the way I want. I want a certain experience. I want it to be perfect. I need it to be perfect. I need to be perfect. That's the same as addiction. I need to have this drink because I need to feel that buzz. I need to watch this porn because I need that physical pleasure feeling in my genitals and in my mind. Like, it's this feeling of needing things to be the way you want because it feels good when it's that way, and not being okay when things aren't the way you want. So perfectionism is a form of addiction. It's addiction to, the pleasure that we get when we feel we're perfect, right? So learning, this is one of the main purposes of meditation, is like when you can sit with that if you can notice that and say, oh, insecurity. Oh, desire to be perfect. Oh, interesting. Oh, self-judgment. Oh, interesting. The moment you notice it, you're no longer enslaved by it. You know, like if you're not noticing it and you're just believing like, no, but I have to concentrate on my breaths and I have to be able to count 10 breaths in a row. And if I can't count 10 breaths in a row, then I'm not good at this. And when you don't see that, you're just living in that story. You're living in that prison of I'm not good enough because I can't count 10 breaths in a row. And you're believing that to be true. And that's a prison. You're suffering in that moment. But if you can notice it and just say, oh, this is a story that my perfectionism is telling me. Oh, how interesting. Then you no longer become like ensnared by that belief. You become the one who observes it and you realize that you are totally different and you don't have to be imprisoned by that belief.
So you work with a lot of high achieving people. I imagine this is something they struggle with a lot, right? And so what inspired you to start Unhooked? And is this what you're noticing a lot about the people that you work with?
Yeah. I mean, like I said, the Venn diagram is overlapping completely.
Yeah.
And so porn addiction, perfectionism, you know, they go hand in hand. And a lot of high achieving men, you know, deal with addiction to pleasure and stimulation, and they want to be perfect, and you know, all of these things. And the reason that I feel so called to do this work is that I was there myself. Again, I kind of mentioned this in my early story, is like I was a high achiever. I was acing every exam, you know, setting the curve in every class, and it never felt good enough. Even when I was the top student in the class, I took joy in it for a second, and then it was like, well, but it's not good enough. I need to be the best in everything. I need to be captain of this team, and you know, it's insatiable. That feeling. There's this. Have you ever heard of the concept of the realm of the hungry ghosts?
The Gabor Mate, Hungry Ghosts?
So Gabor Mate wrote a book like where that's in the title, The Realm of Hungry Ghosts. But it actually comes from Buddhist philosophy. So in Buddhism, there's these different realms of existence. And they're not like real places. It's not like a heaven or a hell that people actually go to. These realms of existence are more manifestations of the mind. So, you know, there's the human realm. There's the heavenly realm where everything is pleasant all the time. There's the hell realm where everything is unpleasant and painful. There's the animal realm where it's all kind of animalistic urges and desires. And there's this one realm called the realm of hungry ghosts. And it's filled with these ghost-like creatures that have these massive stomachs, huge bellies, you know, just massive stomachs and bellies. And they have tiny pinhole mouths and needle-like throats. And so they wander their existence and they can never eat enough to satisfy their massive hunger. And so their whole existence is this existence of hunger and thirst that they can never satisfy. And that's what it feels like to be an addict, is your hunger. You can never satisfy this hunger. You always feel hungry and thirsty and craving for more, and nothing ever feels like it's satisfying that hunger. So that's the realm of the hungry ghosts, and that's what it feels like to be a perfectionist, to be an addict, you know. It's never good enough.
It is like the worst place to live. I lived there for a very long time. And it is when you describe it, it sounds hellish. And now thinking about it, living it was hellish too. And you're right. It wasn't just money or just alcohol or drugs. Like
everything, validation. Like you can never get enough validation from other people. You know, like nothing ever feels good enough.
Yeah,
because it's a bottomless pit that you're trying to fill this void inside of you, but you can never fill enough to actually feel full inside. If you're trying to stuff it with sense pleasure,
Yeah.
If, on the other hand, you learn how to fill it from the inside out with things like connection, gratitude, self-love, patience, those things actually do feed, and satisfy the soul.
Yeah. Wow. I think that's actually a perfect place to end because I think we're a little bit full circle with that. That's amazing. Jeremy, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I learned so much. What I'm going to take away today is that I'm going to create some space between myself and the play button on my podcast. And I notice what helps me is if I move the icon off of my main screen. So I know you said you deleted your Spotify, but if I just like move it and like take it out of my immediate visual cues, then that helps a little bit. But I think a lot of times I give myself a pass because it's like, well, I'm not drinking. And that's great. But I think maybe I do want to create a little space.
Can I give one little final tidbit on that?
Of course.
Just 'cause,
yes.
Yeah. Because I was reading some research recently that was, studying habits, and, there's some habits that we want to quit completely, like porn. It's like, okay, I never want to watch it again, and I'm happy to do that. But there's some things where we want to learn how to moderate, like exercise, or like, certain types of food, or podcasts, or audiobooks. What they found in the research is that it's much easier to moderate if you first have a period of full sobriety. So if you give it up completely first for a set period of 30 days, 60 days, and then move into let me learn how to moderate it, it's much easier than trying to moderate from the beginning.
That makes me so uncomfortable that I know I need to do it.
Yeah.
Idea of it, like, but I'm in the middle of an audiobook right now and I don't know how it ends. But no, you're right. I know when something makes me that uncomfortable, there's something there.
Yeah. Yeah. So I would challenge you, to do 30 days of like, okay, let me have no podcasts or audiobooks on my phone for 30 days and reclaim your mind, because it's like you need space for your mind to process, to think, to be with your own thoughts and have original ideas. That's what I noticed is like I was realizing I was consuming podcasts so much that I wasn't giving my mind any time to have its own original thoughts, except for the rare occasions where I was, doing something where I didn't have it on. But like
you're just
that
regurgitating sort of what you're hearing in a way.
Or you're just constantly shoving stuff in, but you don't actually have time to think your own thoughts.
So when I go to take the garbage out, am I just like focusing now on like tying the bag and like walking up and opening the lid and putting it in?
What am I supposed to do here?
Now that we're even talking about it, maybe I tend to pair it with more like mundane tasks to make them more fun. So now I'm just going to have to like turn the vacuum on and like go back and forth with okay.
Yeah. So there's a couple things, two things I'll just off the bat that can help. One is, this is where mindfulness can become a superpower, like learning how to really be with your experience, whatever you're doing. If you're washing dishes, it can actually be a really pleasant experience, feeling the water on your skin, noticing the feeling of something becoming clean, like just being present with the act of doing that. You notice so much more about the beauty that's all around you. Taking the trash out. You go to take the trash out and suddenly you're actually, look at the trees. And I could hear the sound of birds on this evening. Like, there's a full moon tonight. Whereas if you're listening to your audiobook, it's like you cut yourself off from the universe, So that's one thing. The other is a practice in learning how to be with boredom and learning that, that is going to serve you for the rest of your life. Because the more you buy into this belief that you can't be with boredom, the more and more sensitive you're going to become to the smallest moments of boredom, where you won't be able to sit still for 1 second without, I need my phone, I need a hit, I need a drink, I need a vape, I need something. Whereas the people who are really, truly at peace, it's like they can just sit in a doctor's office waiting for their appointment, and they can just sit there and smile and, be with themselves in a contented way. Like, that's what we all want, right? Is to learn how to be happy with ourselves.
We look at people like that now as like mentally ill. They're like, they must have some sort of like,
right.
like that's weird.
Yeah.
Like someone who's
but
not
really,
on their phone. Yeah.
But those people are the most at peace. They're the most grounded. They have, in Buddhism, there's this phrase that I love. It's called unconditional freedom, which is like freedom in any condition. Whether it's things are pleasant or unpleasant, whether things are boring or exciting, can you have that inner freedom and that inner peace unconditionally? Because what we're all focused on is, let me set the conditions so that it's always pleasant and stimulating all the time. But our happiness is conditional based on things going the way we want.
Yes, that's true. Okay. I'm going to challenge myself. Yeah. I'm going to do it. Are we saying like I love now that I'm bargaining. This is just like with me with alcohol. It's like, what are we saying? Like I can't have any, or like can I?
What about at a wedding?
I can have a glass of champagne at a birthday, right? Like, yeah, no. So we're saying no audiobooks, no podcasts. What about?
So I'll just tell you, like, it's great we're working this out. What I noticed is that for me, audiobooks were less of the issue and podcasts were way more, because the types of podcast I was looking at, like news and things that were just like mindless, kind of stimulating gossip, like, oh, what's going on with the news today? And it was more of that hungry ghost mentality. Whereas when I was putting on an audiobook, even if I was doing it while I was doing the laundry, like it felt actually a bit more wholesome. It felt more okay. And so for me, I actually didn't delete Audible. I left it on there.
Okay.
But I did delete Spotify, my podcast, because that was the more compulsive, like. But what I found is that was actually good enough, because I'm less addicted to my Audible. But for you, it might be different. For you, Audible might be just as,
I think it's
grippy.
I think that it's more the podcasts now that you say it, because the ones that, they're more like salacious than the audiobooks.
Is this
but
just
I think
your inner addict, like trying to
negotiate a bargain? Yeah. I know. I'm aware of that too.
Here's what I would say. If you're not sure, I would say get rid of them both.
Get rid of it all. Yeah.
For 30 days. It's just 30 days,
Okay, I'm still going to let myself listen to music.
On what?
I think I have the willpower to not listen to I listen to audiobooks. No, so I guess on Spotify, but I only listen to podcasts on Apple Podcasts.
Oh, okay. So Spotify, you never listen to podcasts?
No.
Okay.
I only have like my podcast on there, like as a saved podcast. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to
find what works for you.
I'm going to have to negotiate the rules of this surrender, it sounds like.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know. I feel like, whoa, this is harder than I thought. Even just thinking about it is harder than I thought. But okay, how about this? I will preserve music somehow.
Mm-hmm. So I found Apple Music, like the music app.
Yeah.
Are you on an iPhone?
Yeah.
So Apple has an app that's just called Music, I think.
Right,
and I realized this because I had deleted my Spotify, which I normally listen to music on also. And I got to the gym and I was like, oh, I have no music. What am I going to do? And I realized I had the music app and it had like 20 albums that I had from 10 years ago.
Back in the day that you would
when you would listen to a full album. And it was so wonderful, because then I listened to full albums again. And
Yeah.
it was amazing. And so, maybe download Apple Music and see what album
I know I have full albums from Apple Music. I have a lot of like U2 on there, like full U2 albums on there. And like, yeah, okay, this is interesting. I'm gonna do it old school. You're right. I'm going through a Bad Bunny phase, so I may need to like get some Bad Bunny on there.
Yeah. You could still buy albums,
Yeah.
It's like what, $10 for an album? I mean,
Yeah.
it's like it's
I have a
worthwhile
record
investment.
player, shockingly, that I use.
There you go.
So yeah, maybe at home maybe I'll use the record player, because then you have to like
We'll be
walk
seeing you
over,
carrying carrying the record player as you take your trash out. I need this music.
I know. That is what I'll be doing. Actually, yeah, it has Bluetooth attached to it, but no, I won't use the Bluetooth function for the record player. Okay, this is interesting. I mean, really, you don't realize it until you start thinking about the logistics, and you're like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Like, what am I addicted to? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing. Like, so many of these addictions, they build up so slowly and so imperceptibly over time that from any one day to the next, there's no change at all. But if you look back 20 years or 10 years and say, like, what was my life like 20 years ago? Like, it's so different. And this is with porn, especially, like, so many people, they don't notice how ingrained it's become in their life and how much impact it's having, because it started as this small thing that just slowly over time grew bit by bit and slowly became more and more ingrained. And so it's, until you actually give it up, it's very hard to see the way that it's impacted your life and how much you depend on it,
Yeah, no, it's that dependency. It creeps up without you noticing it. And then all of a sudden, when someone asks to take it away, what are you talking about? What do you mean?
What am I going to do?
Yeah.
You mean I have to take out the trash without
and it sounds ridiculous.
listening?
And someone like me, it's like, look, I don't smoke anymore. I don't drink. I don't do drugs. I don't eat meat. Like, I can't turn a podcast off. That's crazy. Like, of all the hard things I think I've done, why does this podcast thing feel like you're like ripping something out of my head?
Right. And this, again, it goes back to what I was saying earlier. It's like, it's true for all of us, but unless we look at the core underlying root of addiction in the mind, again, it doesn't matter like what the substance or behavior is. We have to understand the quality of the mind that wants to numb out and wants to be stimulated constantly. And like going directly to the source, which is the craving mind, is a way to deal with all of them rather than playing whack-a-mole of, oh, I got alcohol. Oh, I got cigarettes. It's like, instead of playing whack-a-mole for the rest of your life, it's just, go into the machine and look at the thing that keeps sending up these moles and saying, oh, okay.
Oh, that's such a good way to look at it. Yeah. And I think I do it to some extent, but you're right. It is the onion, right? And so do I think I'll ever really get to the center of the onion? Probably not. But I'm like, moving in to the center. But yeah.
And, like, I don't know if anybody can even really ever get to the center. It's like, but you just get closer and closer. And the cool thing is like every step along the way that you take brings you more happiness and inner peace because you become less enslaved by external things.
I mean, I'm pretty sure the first week without the podcast is going to feel like I'm more enslaved. I don't think it's going to be that freeing, but
Here's the thing. It's just going to highlight the ways that you're already enslaved.
Yes.
That you've been blind to.
For sure. Well, I will send you an email when I take the trash out.
Amazing.
Let you know how it goes.
Yeah. You're gonna be like, it was magical. I saw an owl fly, and there was a moon, and then a toad, walked in front of me. It's like, yeah.
It's gonna be just like an
experiences.
acid trip. It's just gonna be like,
I was just thinking it's gonna be a psychedelic. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
like no joke. I have clients who literally have said things like that to me. Like they said, I went for a walk without my phone, and it's so amazing how beautiful the world is. And some of them describe that it's almost like being on psychedelics, where it's like how much of their life they were missing out on because they had been closed off. And that when they disconnect and actually just go for a walk and learn how to be present and mindful, they can actually experience so much more that they'd been missing.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Here's hoping that I'm going to start experiencing things I've been missing. Well, thank you so much, Jeremy. This was great.
Yeah. Again, my pleasure. I was happy to come on the show.
Thank you all for listening to Sisters in Sobriety. This was Sisters in Sobriety.
Thank you for listening and being with us today.
If you want to learn more about sobriety and meet your community, find us at sistersinsobriety.substack.com.
Are you a sister in sobriety? Then reach out on social media. We'd love to hear from you.
If you're feeling generous, leave us 5 stars and a review and follow us wherever you listen.
You'll never miss an episode. Until next time.